Look at all these people. This is amazing. Woo! Thank you so much for joining us in probably the smallest meeting room for the ESA conference. So welcome to our Early Careers Forum. Thanks so much for coming. It's a really great turnout. Um, Welcome to this sort of early career experiment. We've tried over the last couple of years to provide different sorts of resources and support for early career ecologists. And so we're just trialing a new format today. And so we're going to try and keep you all in here for about an hour and a half or so in like a discussion type of format. So just forewarning everyone, this is what you're getting yourselves into. We will notice if you leave the room. But I'm going to try and group everyone into sort of 3 chunks to allow for discussion in between so that you don't have, people just talking at you for an hour. But before I begin, I'd really like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today, the Larrakia people, and I pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, and a warm welcome to any traditional owners and Indigenous people in the room today. Thank you so much for joining us. This is really exciting for us. I don't know that we've ever had such a big turnout. So my name's Cara Trelful. I'm from Macquarie University, and I'm on the Early Career Working Group. It's one of the ESA working groups. There's quite a few of us, and we've been working with the Practitioner Engagement Working Group with Sam and Sasha over there hiding, and Lincoln. And we've been working on different activities or initiatives that ESA can take to try and help support people starting out in their career in ecology. So that this forum is a product of our chats, our coffee chats over the last couple of ESAs. So I'm just going to get out of this holding slide. Also, this session is being recorded because we know quite a lot of students couldn't come to Darwin. It was pretty expensive to come up here. So we're recording this and hoping to put it up on the ESA website. So just for everyone to be aware that we'll be recording this session and hopefully being able to make it available to others if they can't get here today. I'm also doing my best at putting pressure on these guys to write up their thoughts into an ESA bulletin issue so that everyone's perspectives can be found again later. You didn't have to turn up today to be able to hear the great stories from these people. So there's some of the resources we're trying to provide after this. So these are the sorts of groups of people you'll be hearing from today. We know that often as undergraduates going through a biology degree or an ecological degree, we are conditioned to think that going into academia is where we should be going, or like the main kind of source for people doing ecology research, but that is not true. And so it's the main point of today. If you walk out of today realizing that there are so many options for you, there's so many wonderful ecology jobs in Australia, that will make me really happy. And I feel like we would have won if everyone walks away from today thinking, yeah, there's so many cool jobs I could apply for, and being armed with the knowledge of how you could go about getting one of those jobs. So to start off the session, I'm going to throw over to Emily and Shana from our Early Career Ecologist Working Group. And just to give you some facts, because we like evidence, being scientists, they've gone and done a little foray into NRM jobs, the currently posted ecological jobs, so that you can get a good sense of what is currently being offered in the ecology space in Australia right now, as of last week. What jobs were up there and what kinds of jobs can we be applying for? So come on up, guys. And all the speakers have 5 minutes max, and I'll find some kind of bell or whistle or something to pull you off. Yep.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, so in the last couple of weeks, we reviewed some jobs from NRM Jobs. We downloaded 44 jobs, I think, from the Ecology, Zoology and Botany category. Yeah. So I'll just leave it here for a minute. We coded the jobs in NVivo. We downloaded the position descriptions first, then coded the jobs under the skills section. According to emergent themes. So what are the skills that you need, and also the sub themes, so sub kind of skills. An example of a sub theme is like the skill might be a skill might be education, and within that you would have whether you need a PhD or a master's degree or an undergraduate degree. So there was heaps for early career ecologists, a few for mid and getting less as you go up. So yeah, 24 out of the 44 for early career, and they were categorized as, I guess, like less than 5 years experience. Most of them, the jobs were in New South Wales, as you can see, and there were also a bunch in Queensland, South Australia and WA. The ones in New South Wales were really a lot of government jobs, so the data is pretty biased according to like some big recruitment drives by, New South Wales government and WA government, South Australia government. Western Australia. And New South Wales had a bunch of consultancy jobs as well. Is that me? So most jobs were in government, and there were 29 skills coded.
Yeah, so we can see on this plot here, the skills are pretty varied in terms of what we were coding. But I will just pull out the top 10 that we had here and divide them also into their kind of like sub skills within them. So the top one that came out the most in these job descriptions was ecology skills, varying from things like ecological management plans, fire management, ecosystem knowledge, which was more about knowing about the place that job was located in, flora identification, restoration, as well as things like wildlife handling and survey. As you can see, something that was interesting was part of the education kind of band. Most of the jobs didn't require any kind of postgraduate degree. You just needed some kind of tertiary education in order to apply for these jobs. And then third in the list there was communication, which was a lot of communicating with others. So whether that was communicating your research or your work in a kind of like a teamwork kind of situation, along with report writing, as well as presentations with a smaller category for like grant writing, peer-reviewed journals, and writing briefing notes and that kind of thing. So I won't go into all of these because we don't have enough time, but I'll just move on then to I'll just make clear also that there's some of the categories didn't actually have subcategories within them. So something like relationships was more about forming like stakeholder engagement or having a relationship with the people that you're working with, not just within your own company, but external groups as well. And I'll just move on to how these differed between the different sectors that we were looking at. So the first one was consultancies and their top 3. This is also just the top 10. Their top ones were technology, as well as needing some kind of tertiary education, and then GIS mapping, relationships and legislation and policy and report writing were all on the same level in terms of the number of times that was referenced. If we move on to government, they needed experience a lot of the time. This was just maybe a number of years experience in terms of doing ecology for that amount of time, or maybe experience with things like legislation. It was just kind of a generic term we used, as well as analytical capability. So all of our critical thinking and our project planning and things we're actually getting out of our degrees, which is great to know, along with things like legislation and policy and fire management, which obviously do come out quite a lot in government jobs. Non-government were coded as the sector that wasn't some more non-consultancies, but more like what was the word I would use? Like NGOs, those kind of sectors, which mainly needed ecology skills. That was a lot of the wildlife handling or the flora identification or knowing about the place that the job was located in, as well as the use of technology and then project management as well. Universities actually came up quite highly with needing lots of different communication skills, as well as personal attributes, which were coded as things like being able to work autonomously or part of a team, and be able to kind of like run your own project there, as well as obviously analytical capabilities or those critical thinking skills that we're gaining. And I think our last one was council work, and no surprise that legislation and policy comes out quite highly in those, along with project management and communication. I think that was our last one of our little plots. Oh no, I also just plotted out just the early career ones as well. So this was just looking at the early career across all of our states and all of our sectors, and time management came up top, as well as legislation and policy and analytical capability. Things like travel, being willing to like go into the field, that kind of thing. But I think that was all of our points. Yes, it is. So I think back to Cara.
All right, so that was a brief rundown of the really varied sorts of jobs that are available right now and the huge skill set that is being requested. You can see there's way more than academic jobs that are out there, and the lineup of people willing to talk to you today about their job and how they got into their ecological career really demonstrates that. And so I'm going to hand over to our gold medal winner, Professor Dieter Hochuli, because he's so charismatic and really great at facilitating, and a comedian, also in a band. So he has such a diverse skill set. So I thought he's just the best person to facilitate this type of session. And Dieter's going to ask you this question and see if we can start a discussion on what you guys want to hear about today before we throw over to some of our speakers.
Thanks, Kate. Look, I won't say much. I think one of the things that's really important, you can see with the scale of the number of people in here, it's quite challenging to avoid this being a one-on-one sort of conversation with people. So Cara set up a Slido for this, which is what career advice do you want to hear about today? If you go to slido.com and put in 1484952, that number again, 1484952. It's a way of actually having an idea of finding the consensus in the types of questions you might be asking. I think you can vote up, and I think you can't vote them down. I think you can vote up certain questions that matter to you. It's obvious. I think the best pathway for me now is to leave you with that as a thing to look at and feel. I think it'd be really good if you can look at that now and think about some of the things that you would like to hear. But I'd like to probably, I think we're going to do this in groups of 3 or 4, and then have a bit of a, I don't know, calisthenics, or what do we do? I don't know. Well, yeah, we're going to have a bit of a break because obviously there's the one thing I would like to frame is that these people have got an enormous amount of expertise that they can share with you, but they're also going to be really good listeners. So one of the things that we can do is we can actually make this about you. I don't think this isn't, no disrespect to any of you, this isn't about you. This is really about trying to hear from them. And some of the things that will come up in your questions won't necessarily have been on the roadmap. I know many of you already, many of the folk in the line here and their diverse approach. So what I might do is hand over to our first speaker, who is, I'm not sure what.
John.
Oh, it's a great, that's not a great pleasure. It's no, I'd just like to introduce, no, I'd like to, John, you've got to come this side, I think. Just one little thing too, with respects to any questions from the floor. This is being streamed and recorded. So we'll be using the microphones for the questions. That same goes for you, that to hear what's being said, we need to be using these microphones after. So you'll be at the lectern. You're being recorded.
Sure. Yeah. Done that. Thank you, Dieter. So my name's John Morgan, and I've got either the easiest or the hardest gig today. So I'm a research academic. So a lot of you probably are doing a PhD, a master's, or an honours. Who's actually already in a university system? Put your hand up. Hi. Okay. Okay. So I don't want to doubt you, but who's not? Because I'm just getting a feel for some of you. It's good. So my part today is to talk about academia is actually a career pathway for some of you, because you might actually really want to do that. So I want to talk very little bit about me, but also talk about what I think you need to be able to do, or some tips for you how you could get into academia. So I started my academic job when I was 33. So just to put it in context, how old I was. And that was in 2001. And I'd done 2 short-term postdocs. So that's how I had to get there. I'm not saying that's what happens now, but just 33, I don't know, you might think that's really old, or to start an academic career, or you might think it's really young. I don't know. We can talk about that. So I'm just going to run through a few slides about what I do. So I'm a teaching and research academic, so really important to distinguish that getting a research-only job is actually really challenging in a university system. My life is guided by this, 40-40-20. What is 40-40-20? Well, for 40% of the time, I have a research lab full of students. And in fact, I just counted them up before, and actually I didn't because I'd have to do it again. I've got 12 at the moment. So that's a fairly big research lab. And so that's a real privilege for me to run a lab to mentor students and get them doing ecological science. So that might be a reason why you want to become a research academic, is because you have that desire to grow a lab where you work with lots of fun people. And Dieter and David made it really clear today, working with people is central to all of our jobs. So what do I do the rest of the time? Well, I teach 40% of the time, nominally, it's a bit more, into first, second, third year. And I run field courses. They're the best part of my teaching. But if you're going to be in academia, you have to teach. In fact, you should want to teach. You all have had lecturers where you know they shouldn't have been teaching. But hopefully you've come across at least one where you thought, that's why I'm doing what I'm doing. Again, exactly what people have been saying today. For 20% of the time, that's what's called administration and service. That's the stuff I do because I really like it and I'm passionate. Not the first bit, university committees and line management, but coming to the ESA, contributing to this kind of stuff. Editorial boards on journals. You don't get your papers published if you don't have people doing that. So that's a really good opportunity to get involved in your discipline. Returning to that idea of a research lab, I'm a mentor. This is how I view it. Not everyone's going to think this, but this is me. This is my view of the world. I'm a mentor, teacher, enabler. I'm a dreamer. I'm a champion for causes, but for people. I'm an ecologist. You see, it's quite a long way down the list, actually. I don't see myself as an ecologist first and foremost. That's what I do. I do all these other things. I'm a leader. I'm a guide. I'm a friend. David mentioned it. Dieter mentioned it as well. This is actually a great opportunity where I know my students are my friends and I will walk with them through their whole career. It's not something you can say in most jobs. So it's actually a really good driver, motivation for why you might want to do this type of job. I ripped this off. I found this somewhere. This is my research philosophy pretty closely. I want to do interesting stuff. I want to do stuff that helps the world, not so much people, but anyway. But I want to work with nice people. And in research academia, that's what you get a really good opportunity to do. And so that is a really clear motivator for getting into this kind of field, if they're the kind of things that resonate with you. A lot of you would be really worried about, how do you get into this? I have to be a high flyer. I have to have thousands of papers and all that kind of stuff. That is actually changing. At my university, we are now not so much looking at the first of those two things. We're looking at the second. Like, true impact is, how do you change things? And to hear David's journey today, how he's got the IUCN, Red List community thing, I think, wow. And we've heard that many times this week of, like, you think, wow. And I keep saying to myself, I have to get on with my career, actually. So if you're worried about having to be the first, have heaps of papers, that's really great as well, it's helpful. But universities are starting to think about, how does your work actually influence things? So it's good to keep that in the back of your mind. Jobs in my sector, you already know. If you've got a PhD, you might go on to research academic. You'd start as a level B, probably academic. We've got this weird system where the higher you up, the lower down the alphabet you go. You'd think that level A should be the highest, shouldn't you? And there's some kind of ideas there. You might be a postdoc, what we call them research fellows at my university, on funded work. I don't need to talk to you about those. You kind of probably have some ideas about what goes on in universities if you're involved in a university sector. But don't discount education, don't discount technical support. They're some of the really fun jobs, actually, because you get to help lots of other people. And if you're that sort of person, a giving sort of person, education, as Dieter said, we should be embedding education in ecology and we should be valuing it. So we need people who value it as much as saying the words of doing it. Okay, a couple more slides, sorry. What are we going to do? What I look for, interview panel. So I sit on these now because I'm senior enough to have to, appoint people. Outside of your discipline-specific skills, we've all seen amazing talks this week, you're all great. So if you're great, that's not going to be necessarily all you have to be. So when you come into my interview, I'm looking for these things. What's your point of difference? Why would I appoint you? So being different is good. You don't have to be like everyone else. You might have some skills, might have some views on the world. I think it was really interesting to hear from Dieter today. Natural history, really important. That's a point of difference. No one's talking about that. Why you now? Think about that, though. General skills, it's amazing, they've just come up. You were just talking about it, Emily. Those skills about writing, communication, all that kind of stuff, relationship building. Can you work with people? Project management. Thank you. We heard that as well. If you're doing a PhD, a master's in honours, you're just a project manager, really, working on a really cool project. So if you can do that well, that's what we look for. This is about not being it all about you. I don't appoint people where it's all about them. It's actually, you're putting others at the centre of everything you do. And finally, some take-home tips, quickly. Everyone has this, including me. And I've spoken to some people at this conference. Oh, I don't want to talk to that person, I'm scared. Accept it and be your best version that you can. Don't ever think that you're not good enough. Just accept everyone's got the same problem here. And it's just be the best version of you. This week, well, this year, for argument's sake, contribute to your discipline. Become known. Start actually building a profile. I think that's really important. This week, be visible. Come and talk to me. I remember you guys. I love seeing great talks, talking to students. That creates an impression, and you might come want to get a job with me later on, 5 years down the track, and I'll have an impression, a really good one about you. So don't be scared as well about the future. Embrace it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you very much, John. Just a quick message about the Slido. If you could try and put your questions in the question and answer rather than the polls, please ignore the bat-related questions. They were trials. You'll see them there. So whoever's voted those up, yeah, Cara will answer those. So they should be. You can post anonymously or as a person, as you. Our next speaker is Lincoln Kern from Practical Ecology. Thank you, Lincoln.
Thank you. I've been asked difficult things in my career. I once taught a course on native vegetation and planning on an ongoing basis. One day, huge subject. 5 minutes, huge subject today. So when I was asked to do this, I basically reviewed in my head and on the slides to some degree today, my career in consulting for 30 years. So hopefully I can cover this in 5 minutes. And I do want to start out with, you can tell from my accent, I'm not from here. And I have a totally different academic experience to about everyone in this room, I'm sure. A little college in Ohio with a few hundred students. Unique things, something John just said made me think too about how unique it was, is that I was on selection panels for professors when I was a senior. And I went back 15 years later and 1 or 2 of them were still there. I must have made good choices. And we had our own nature reserve. You could walk 5 minutes from the science building. At Antioch, where I went, in fact, the science building wasn't named after a donor. It was named the science building because that's what it was about. We also had a 1,000-acre nature reserve right there. So there's the map, and I spent a lot of time there studying and actually teaching. We also had a museum, so I got to do environmental education with children as well. So let me get beyond that, because this next slide is really just a couple slides of, I came to Australia for a visit. I graduated in '86. My first job, I studied environmental science. The problem with environmental science is you study brown things like engineering and energy, you study green things like ecology, and then you get your graduate degree and you don't know what the hell to do because there seems to be so many choices. But then I ran across the Society for Ecological Restoration, which was founded in the late '80s. There are international conferences in Darwin in 3 months if you want to come. And I figured out, now I won't do any of that brown thing, no engineering, whatever. I'll do restoration, ecological restoration. So I came to Australia in 1989, and it was quite fortunate that the ecological restoration movement in Melbourne was taking off. Bush Regen had started in Sydney with the Bradley sisters, and new courses were going in Melbourne. And I met a bunch of people who I still work with today on and off from that course. And with no local experience, I ended up founding my own company because I couldn't get a job with anybody else. And I even had recruiters going, "You seem all competent, but nobody wants to hire you, as if you're weird." And so I just started working, and project by project, it worked. Now, the other thing that happened, the theme of a consultant is you mostly follow instructions. Government passes laws. They pass procedures like habitat hectares, vegetation quality assessment, procedures to work through development applications. And that's what I started getting sucked into. I wanted just to restore vegetation, manage nature, nature reserves. And I ended up really getting sucked into consulting because I could write reports and talk to people and help participate. I learned early that it's important that an ecologist who understands flora and fauna is in those development application processes. It is really important that you can say, oh, we need a good buffer. We need to design it this way. And it's better to be in early before and sometimes developers will push you and you won't be happy with pushing through applications. Sometimes you have to give up on improving the proposal and hope that the bureaucrats in government will improve it later, which usually happens, but not all the time. So the other theme of my little timeline here too is that when I arrived in 1989 is when the native vegetation permits were finally required in Victoria, or relatively early. And then things like the EPBC Act was passed. If I go into this next one, in 2003, the Native Veg Framework was gazetted, which was the first biodiversity offset program in the world. I can confirm this because somebody at the first National Offsets Conference did a presentation on this and reported it back to me and the whole room. But if you've worked in Victoria on development as a consultant, you've worked on offset, the oldest offset program in the world, which there'll be another debate about offset somewhere else. I won't go there, but so I had to get my mind around that. Now, the other point about this timeline too is 10 years later, the government changed the whole native veg assessment procedure for development applications, revolutionized it. It was completely, utterly different. Now it's based on mapping and modeling, and you know the old term about modeling is it's mostly bullshit except when it works. There's another line there, but I'm forgetting. So it even changed again in 2017. So as a consultant, you constantly keep up with the law. Now, fortunately, I enjoy that, and so I'm the planning geek in my office. I can periodically, almost every day, one of my staff will come and say, what about this weird planning situation? And I'll go, well, I think I understand what's going on, but I might have to ask somebody sometimes. But after 30 years, I've learned enough. Now, I'm not sure how my 5 minutes are going. What I want to say about consultancy is there's a lot of things up there, but let me summarize by saying there's a summary. Consultancy, I keep a good eye on it because if I run a business, I have competitors, but I also have people I work with. And so I mostly keep an eye on consultancy, and it's evolved a lot over time. In the 90s, when I started, we would sometimes work and do big projects like roads and pipelines and so on. But a few other consultancies in Victoria kind of took that baton. But also what happened is that the big infrastructure design firms like GHD and so on put a lot of people on, and they have their own ecological teams. And they certainly pay better than my little company, even though you have to be the right person for that, of course. The other trend that I've really appreciated to see mostly is this nonprofit. There's quite a few in the last few years of basically cooperatives or nonprofit organizations starting to do consulting. Now, sometimes they're focused on restoration projects and ecological projects. Sometimes they're actually nonprofits who are actually working with the community and needing ecologists to help drive that. And we have quite a few in Victoria who do that. So I think that's a really important trend. Now, as far as my company goes, I'm still happy with where we've gotten. We're still small, smallish, 20 staff. And I work for individuals, for councils, sometimes state government. And a lot of those huge, big infrastructure projects, I don't have to torture myself with because you need like 5 people for months and to work on these things. And often it's just good to deal with people and individuals, and that's our niche in the market. and you help people through their life. I have a view that sometimes ecologists should be like lawyers, is that we all need one sometime. Um, but I have yet to have ecological aid ever, an ecological aid fund ever established. So let me finish my 5 minutes with a few take-home messages, if I'm there. Invest in flora and fauna knowledge and experience, paid and unpaid. Now, of course, you've probably all experienced this, but I remember I use this example. There's 5,000 indigenous plant species in Victoria, about 2,000 weed species. If you rock up, if you don't know your plants and you're supposed to do a flora survey, if you haven't put the effort in over quite a few years, you won't be able to do it. And a consultancy, when you rock up, you need to bring certain skills. It's just and those skills are pretty substantial, and you got to work on them over time. So I made the second point I have made before, but it is important. I found, particularly in consultancy, because all our work is driven by planning laws. And it's actually, they've gotten more and more powerful over time. So it's really useful to know how they work. And sometimes you actually win because you know how they work. And I often win at VCAT. Lately, I've decided I'm going to try and prevent all the native grassland from being cleared in Victoria. So whenever anybody asks me on a case and a planning appeal, I will do that. And I'm waiting for answers for a couple at the moment. Hopefully, we'll be good. We did win last year. We knocked back a permit for a large site in Western Melbourne, which was quite good. John and I were on the same side. Now, consultancy opportunities are diverse, and I will make this point, can be self-made. What I'm really happy about is I see a lot of older consultants who got sick of working for other people, and they form kitchen table consultancies, and it works. But I've also seen younger people do it. And I call them kitchen table or one-man bands, even though that's sexist. One-person bands doesn't work as well. But they can be self-made because, anybody can get an ABN or start a company and market their services. It takes a bit of bravery and a bit of nerve, but you can do it. What you do have to cope with, though, is business management if you do that path. And it's sometimes an adventure, and it's sometimes good, and it's sometimes just a burden that you get sick of. I'll be blunt about that. But I'd still say consultants, this is my final point too, I've made this point, but I still feel valued. The work I do is important because I participate in development processes. The juggernaut of development is still on a head-on path with biodiversity. And most of the time, I find that we can improve the outcomes on the work we do. And that's what's really important, and that's what we need to do. I do have a joke. I'll end with my joke is whenever any of my staff complain about our clients, I go, let me say again, this job would be great if it wasn't for the clients. But then, of course, they're the ones who pay.
Thank you, Lincoln. Cara, I just want to run the Slido number through again. Look, so it's really great to see the questions you're already asking, and some of them one of the questions that's ranked top at the moment relates to panelists in non-academic careers. How much and what kind of research do you do? So our next speaker is Heather Neely, who's going to speak to us about, her job. Sorry.
Hi guys, I don't have any slides or jokes, you'll be pleased to know. So my name's Heather. I work for a conservation NGO called the Australian Landscape Trust. We are sort of like a poor man's bush heritage. That was a little bit of a joke. But so ALT, Australian Landscape Trust, have two large properties that they manage in South Australia. My job involves doing on-ground restoration works, monitoring that stuff, doing research that relates to those works. I also work with our education ecologist to design education programs for high school students and primary school students. I supervise research students. I've got 2 PhD students and an honours student at the moment. What else do I do? I work with our Indigenous Ranger group, which also operates out of Cowpram. And more broadly, do a lot of collaborating with universities, with neighbouring landholders, with state, federal, and our local NRM groups. So this is a position that I've taken out of my PhD. So I'm 5 years out of my PhD. I worked the first 3 years full-time, and I've worked the second 2 years at half-time. So I actually also live on Cowpram with my family. And the way I got to this job, I'm not advocating that you should do this, but this is just my story. So I'm 39. I was 21 when I finished my honours, and I've sort of been in the ecology sphere since then. My 20s, I aimlessly went from job to job, and probably reflective of the current job environment of short-term contracts and stuff like that. So I finished my honours when I was 21. I went and worked in the mining industry as an environmental officer for 2 years. I actually got made redundant from that job because it was during the global financial crisis. I then worked for 18 months at Arid Recovery, some of you know it, as a research assistant on a dingo project. I then moved to Brisbane, and I worked for about 2 years as an ecological consultant. I worked all across Queensland, doing biodiversity surveys, that kind of stuff. What did I do next? I then moved to regional Queensland and worked for another 18 months or so in a regional council as a natural resource management officer. I then had a baby, so I took some time out of paid work, and it was at that point, at the age of about 27, 28, I realised I wanted a career in research and more science, and so I decided to then start a PhD. So I started my PhD at 29 at James Cook University. It was a very applied project. It was about grazing impacts on wildlife. Had another baby. Finished my PhD. I then was really interested in science communication, and so I wrote a children's picture book about nature all around us, and designed a program to deliver that to school students in Townsville where I was living. And then I started the job I've got now. So, and also had another baby. So yeah, my career has been a meandering path. All those little bits, I guess, are skills that you take with you and you bring into the job. So the skills that are really useful for me in this job, obviously there's a broad technical knowledge of the system that I'm working in. I won't go too much into that, but probably one of the other skills that are really, really, really important are talking to people, a broad audience, about what you do. So we're in a little bit of a bubble here because we're all ecologists and we all think that what we're talking about is interesting. It's also really good to be in places where people don't care about what you do. They couldn't care less. And so you have to work out how to speak to those people in a way that makes sense to them. Kids are also good for that as well. So yeah, that's probably a key skill, is just that communication stuff. Tips to get into a career in ecology. I guess I don't really like to give advice, but just don't worry if you don't take a linear path. My path has not been linear at all. As I said, I had no career plan throughout my whole 20s. I knew I wanted to be in ecology, so I just hovered around and stayed in that space. And it's probably not until after I finished my PhD and came into this job that it was sort of like, everything had brought me to that point, and I really felt like I'd found my place in ecology. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Heather. For those wondering, Heather's book is called Who's Making That Noise? And it's a very good read. I've got a copy, I think. Or 57. Our next speaker is Anna Richards from CSIRO.
Hi, everybody. I'll try and be quick. So my name's Anna Richards. I'm a plant ecologist. I work at CSIRO here in Darwin, and I've worked there for 15 years. So I started off as a postdoc. I did a 3-year postdoc, and I was lucky enough to get a permanent position there. My role there is a team leader. So I lead a team of research scientists, research projects officers, technicians, postdocs and students. There's 8 in my team. And I also lead projects as well. So CSIRO, we have people management and we have a project management stream. CSIRO is an applied research organisation, so we have end-user driven research, which is really fun. That's the thing I really like about it, but it does mean that you get to do lots of different things. So you have to be a bit of a generalist at CSIRO. So I spend a lot of my time meeting with clients and working up programs of work, activities and timelines and deliverables, working out how we can solve challenges, pulling together diverse teams of people. I work with a lot of people in different disciplines, which is really fun, and you get to learn about lots of different types of science. And I have to do that to bring in my salary. So I have to bring in enough money to cover my salary and my team's salary as well. So there's some pressure around that, but it's actually very exciting too. So I put it on my phone. So I have some core skills that I was asked to talk about for my job. So some of the things other than that background in ecology that's really useful is project management skills. And I think that's come up before, John mentioned. So being able to manage budgets and timelines, being able to manage teams and being able to delegate effectively is really a critical skill. Another one that's been quite important is working cross-disciplinary, so across different disciplines, but also transdisciplinary, so with non-traditional knowledge holders. That's increasingly becoming something that we really value in the projects that we're doing, and it really brings a lot of interesting challenges, and I find that really exciting when you're working across those different spaces. And the last one that sort of came up in the first assessment of NRM jobs was those digital skills. So they're really important, just being able to understand a bit about computer code. You don't have to be a fabulous coder, but understanding how to do a bit of that. Information or aspects of data management is really critical and becoming more so. How you work in the cloud and with high performance computing and so forth. And then spatial analyses is something that we really value, some of those skills as well. And then I just had one take-home message, and John stole my thunder a bit. That's because I spoke to him yesterday and I gave it away to you. But anyway, I'll do it anyway. I thought I was going first. Anyway, one thing that we've been doing in CSIRO for a while is thinking about science impact. Scientific publications are very important. I recommend you still do those, but we also like to think about impact more broadly. So when we're planning many of our projects, we do something called impact planning, where we have a broad strategic goal that we're aiming for, and it's a cross-organisational goal. We have a few of those, but one of them that we work towards is healthy, resilient and valuable environments. And so if you're doing an impact planning, you're trying to make sure that the activities and outcomes and outputs that you're doing in a project are trying to address some of that, or partly address that goal. And so what we do is we work backwards from that goal and go, what kind of outcomes would we like to see from that project that would speak to that goal? And they might be near-term outcomes and longer-term outcomes, and we'll map those. What kind of outputs would lead to those outcomes? And then what kind of activities would you be doing in that project to lead to those outputs? So you might think some of the impacts that we come to when you do this impact planning are things like, how is your science going to change the way decisions are being made or provide better evidence basis for those decisions? Is your science leading to an organisation or a group receiving funding to do good things that result in a better environmental outcome? Are there on-ground actions or outcomes that are being achieved as a result of your science? And so being able to articulate that impact is really important. And we often ask this in interviews when we have interviews for positions. So having a narrative around how your science might have an impact in that sense, or how it does have an impact, it sort of shows that you're thinking, you're articulating a broader view about your science, not just about you as a researcher, but how your science meets a broader scientific innovation space, which I think is likely to be of interest to many organisations who are interested in that space. And that's all.
Great. So there will be a little bit of thank you very much, Anna, Heather, John, and Lincoln for those presentations. One of the things that's really important here too is you now know what these people look like. So when you're hunting them down during this meeting, they've volunteered their time to talk to you about this. Don't hesitate to snaffle them if you need to as well. Kara's just going to put up our Slido thing, but I guess we could take a couple of questions from the floor to start with. So I might just, was anyone interested? I mean, there's a few really. I should also flag that we were just speaking about the questions that you put into that Slido. If you've had a look at the Slido, do you want to give the instructions for that and to how to log onto it? Because basically, I think they've got to form a roadmap for the report in the bulletin. You're all members of the society, aren't you? Yeah, I mean, so the questions that are in there, some of them are really complex and some of them are also quite confronting, I think you'll find too. So would anyone like to ask a question while we just have a quick sort of segue?
I just want to point out quickly that actually being able to use Slido is a tech skill you can put on your CV to allow you to do anonymous surveys within or without meetings.
It's Kirsti Abbott from the museum. I will just flag one thing that's been really common in there, and that a lot of the questions that are in the Slido that have been put up. When I say they're confronting, there's some real challenges in the world that you guys are going to work into, and I think there's a real fear of survivor bias being part of what comes into that kind of advice and the commentaries that we've given, and that's why some of you will benefit significantly from hunting down people and asking us one-on-one about pathways and trajectories. For instance, I've noticed a few people have commented about education-focused things. I'm not sure we've really got a strong education-focused element here, but it's one of the things that we can actually sort of like speak to and put into the bulletin a little bit later. So that's really helpful. So, Cara, do you want to walk us? Yeah. So the other thing that's here is the idea of you guys voting up these things. That was put in last night to test if it was working okay. Is that you can vote up the things that you think matter, and it really gives us a bit of a roadmap for what we can ask people here today. So I don't know if the best path forward, given the proximity we all are into each other, is just to keep soldiering through, Cara, or would you like to?
Unless anyone has burning right now.
Two burning questions. Or burning.
Okay. Yeah, thank you guys for all those talks. I was really interested in, Heather, your pathway and the non-linear kind of road, but also John working in academia. How do you see, I guess, like I'm a postdoc at the moment, and I guess I see that this leaky pipeline's a real problem for women who do go off and have children and end up taking up on more responsibilities in the home or whatever, for whatever reason. Do you see that trend changing in academia, or should, like, it's confronting as somebody who wants to go into research to then try and decide whether to take this more non-linear path out of academia, even if you want to? Does that, I don't know if I phrased that correctly, but
Look, I'm a sample size of one, but I see within my university, so I can't speak about other universities. This is something we are really trying to address. Like it's not something that was even on the horizon 10 years ago, really. It's something we know it's a challenge, and we're looking at pathways to help like that pathway. I'm not going to give you a great answer here, and we probably need to talk about it one-on-one, but it's a really clear challenge that you've articulated. I think that the system, some of the system anyway, is really understanding in a much better way than they had previously. And so I think there are now mechanisms that exist that didn't exist, certainly, 10 years ago, to help facilitate that. I mean, this non-linear, I think, hopefully what you're going to get out today, we're all non-linear, really. And if we're not, that's the exception to the rule.
And should we just get us?
I just thought I'd say I'm I just got an academic job this year. So come and talk to me if you want. No, I'm also NEC is one, but yeah, and having a champion to help you navigate that is probably the most important thing that helped me, and that was Tita.
Oh, yes, totally. I do actually have a follow-up question to that. Sorry, I will pass over in a second. The follow-up question to that is, we talk a lot about these metrics for how we measure success, and one of them is publications, obviously, and you said we're kind of moving away from this impact to bigger, broader impacts. One of, I guess, the questions is not every institution does that, and it's still very much a KPI for promotions. So you might get hired based on other impacts, but do you see a future in which promotions aren't dependent on, like, especially self-funded people?
25 words or less, John.
So the ARC is going to this as well. Like, they're actually saying we want to see this different form of impact. That's 7 words.
I've got 13.
Think about where you, like, what's a good fit for you to work in. I'm actually going to advise again. If you think you should go to the biggest lab with the biggest name, it's probably the worst mistake of your life, because there's going to be a culture there that there's a reason why they're the biggest lab with the biggest name, and you might actually decide that a different place is a better fit for you. So don't let prestige override your life, like, you know, what you want to do with your life.
We might have a quick question, and you're going to start out. The next speaker will be on video, so if you can just
So onto that idea of broader impact of your research. How do you? Just in that awkward finished PhD, not a doctor yet. Stage. How do you? I guess if my research is quite unique, and I'm kind of having trouble getting people to believe in the broader impact of it. What's some good advice on
that's a
how
great question. I might get the Cyro person to start with that, Anna, if you're happy to do that. But I'm happy to have others do it too. But there'll be recurring themes in these presentations. I think that I'm guessing there might be recurring themes, but
So how to articulate that broader impact? Is that have I got that question?
Yeah, like how do you get them to understand it? Because it's
I guess probably I'd go back to what I was talking about before. I think that thinking through and I can talk to you about it in more detail, show you a slide, that planning pathway really helps unpack that a bit. So there's some great tools where you can start at the larger end and then work your way back that help a little bit in making it more of a narrative that you can see where the impact pathway goes.
Thanks for that. We might move on because one of the it really is important. If nothing else, if you get to hear these, I've got this. Hear these perspectives. You're not meant to hit them, are you? Sorry, Kelvin. It's just really important. Our next speaker will be Stefina Sale from the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island, who's the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Cultural Coordinator for Bush Heritage. So, unfortunately, she fell ill to the. You can guess what. But she's kindly provided this video for us. And again, what we're trying to do is make sure you get these diverse perspectives. I'll grab those microphones.
turn, building cultural competency. How I got into this job was based on my skills of working in community and living in community all my life. I have used the knowledge from my parents, my grandparents, and my great-great-grandparents. That was
your famous story. It's really good. It's inspiring.
Good morning, Nameri Kapu Batanga. My name is Stefina Sally. I am the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Cultural Coordinator for Bush Heritage. My mother's country is Kanju in Cape York. My father is from Bardo Island in the Torres Straits, and I have unique connections to the Gumatj people here in Northeast Queensland. As the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Cultural Coordinator, my role is about building a culturally capable organisation and building cultural capacity across the organisation. That's through running cultural awareness workshops, creating a culturally safe space for all our staff and employees, as well as, in turn, building cultural competency. How I got into this job was based on my skills of working in community and living in community all my life. I have used the knowledge from my parents, my grandparents, and my great-great-grandparents that were handed down to me and through my elders to help, design workshops and develop workshops to raise awareness of the complexities in our communities and some of the barriers and that we have as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people when it comes to things like entering the workforce, education, health, all those issues that are in our community. As you know, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, First Nation people of Australia, for 80,000 years, we've passed our knowledges to generation through oral storytelling, through songlines, through dance, through language. It was never written, and we've had the best philosophers, the best astrologers, the best anthropologists, the best archaeologists, as well as the best ecologists as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We've been practicing that for the past 80,000 years. Understanding that knowledge, what was passed down from my elders, I have taken that and been able to incorporate that in the workshops that I run, the cultural awareness workshops that I run, and the ability to have that narrative about the importance of our role as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in ensuring that we look after country and that we care for the country because it is so much a part of us. It's our very being. One thing I love about working with Bush Heritage is that Bush Heritage really does understand the importance of the role that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people play in conservation and the important role and knowledge that they bring in regards to looking after country or caring for country. One of the exciting things at the moment for Bush Heritage is we've been working closely with the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander workforce in developing a workforce plan where we see the ability to bring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people from community and those skills that we use every day in our community to be able to put it into roles within the organisation through traineeships and internships. I want to share a story for myself. I actually didn't finish high school. I worked most of my life, finished school in year 9, and just every career path I ever took was bringing the skills that I learned from community into those different jobs. It was only last year that I had the opportunity to attend university through a scholarship.
I now have completed my Masters Indigenous Social Leadership Change, and that was a scary journey for myself. Not being at any educational institution since I was 14 or 15. That journey of going through university was a very scary time for me. I found myself questioning myself constantly whether I could do this, whether I was good enough to do this, whether I had the capability to complete this Masters. But one thing I found through that journey was drawing on my cultural knowledge, my understanding, drawing on the skills that I gained through growing up in community actually helped me get through what seemed at that point in time my toughest time in my life. And I have to thank, those people that were before me that helped me get through that, through giving me cultural knowledge and understanding and how to put it into practice and into my professional life. If I had to pass on any take-home message to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people that are looking for a role or career in conservation or career in ecology, is the knowledge is there. Our knowledge is there from our ancestors, from our elders, and we put it into practice every day when we go out hunting and when we go out gathering, when we're out on country with family. And I'm really thankful that I work for such a great organisation like Bush Heritage that sees the importance of what we do every day in our lives as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and those skills that we use to feed our family or feed our community or our cultural practices, and how important that is to becoming to developing a career for yourself. Don't ever think that it's too hard. And I think that's where sometimes we forget that we might not have a qualification, we might not have gone through an education system, but we've had the best teachers. We've had our own school and university, which has been our land and sea, and we have the knowledge to actually fulfill roles as ecologists.
I'd love to thank Stefana for doing that. We're going to continue the Bush Heritage theme now with Hedley Grantham. I don't know if Bush Heritage is the theme. You might just say this isn't related to you. One of the rising questions is people are interested in our failures. So yeah.
Well, I've got going blind and I've got a broken toe. Yeah, thanks everyone. I thought there was only going to be about 3 people here, but this is amazing. I haven't got a presentation. So yeah, I guess my job, it sounds like 3 positions sometimes, but it's one. I've got a joint position with Bush Heritage as the chief scientist and also as associate professor at the Centre for Ecosystem Science at University of New South Wales. And I'm also the research director for the Arid Zone Research Station. And I won't talk about that because I've got a poster right after this, number 25, come and talk to me about Fowler's Gap. But just to give you a bit about Bush Heritage, some of the work that I do is helping with the planning team. So we do landscape planning, trying to understand potential properties that we might buy or people we might partner with. I help with the sort of management planning process of that. So each reserve has a management plan, monitoring plan, also a science plan around that. So what are the key scientific questions, and also helping with research partnerships and thinking about, how we can strategically build those collaborations. Just to talk a bit about bush heritage, there's really a lot of opportunities there. And Steph talked about the ATSI group, the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander group, who are doing a whole bunch of work that she sort of discussed, important work around engagement, etc., teaching us as well. They do a lot to teach us. But we've got, I don't know, maybe about 20 ecologists working for us, which includes sort of reserve level ecologists, some ecologists working with Indigenous people on their lands, senior ecologists. There's a conservation planning team that sort of run those processes around landscape planning, the reserve level management plans. A bit of an advertisement, we've got a thing called Seeding the Future, and so we have things like paid internships. At the moment, I think there's roughly about 10 a year where we encourage people to apply, and it's roughly 3 months' work, and you do get paid for that. But through that Seeding the Future, there's other opportunities as well. So just Google it and see what sort of opportunities there are. How did I get here? Well, I blame being a punk in my teenage years, but I won't talk about that. I was lucky enough during my undergrad, during the third year, we had in conservation biology, guy Bob Pressey, who very famous conservation planner, came and gave a bit of a lecture, and it was around the time of these negotiations around forest allocation and working out, where are the most important, forests we should be protecting or giving up, and how do we negotiate that? And I was like, I want to do that. That's what I want to do. And I was lucky enough to then do a master's and a master's honours with him. But at the same time, I was volunteering a lot. I was volunteering with National Parks and Wildlife in New South Wales, with the museum, National Parks Association, just really trying to, get experience at the same time. And was lucky to get it into do a PhD with Hugh Possingham and his lab. And there's two big opportunities that lab gave me. One, he was doing a lot of science working groups at the time, so it really allowed me to attend lots of workshops and collaborate with different people from all around the world and really develop that collaborative ties, not just in Australia but globally. And I was really interested in applied, science, and was lucky enough to, through that, be able to help with South Africa and their marine planning exercises, with Eastern Indonesia around marine park planning again, Timor-Leste around protected areas assessment, and through, I guess, that real practical on the ground, like applying the science to real life planning problems, was able to get into working with international conservation groups and spend about a bit over 10 years working for Conservation International and Wildlife Conservation Society. And just to say, there's a lot of international conservation jobs out there, and again, like both with bush heritage and with those NGOs, you don't need a PhD. There's a lot of jobs in conservation, for conservation scientists or conservation ecologists. And so, yeah, have a look beyond Australia if you're interested and see the world. I recommend it. But yeah, it was pretty exhausting doing international conservation. So sort of, spent the last year or so really, focusing on Australia. I guess my 3 take-home messages for you. The first one is build a network, collaborate, talk to people. I mean, it's been said already, like just talk, I know it's hard, especially if you're not a outgoing person, but I really believe a lot of my opportunities have just come from just knowing people and finding those opportunities and building that network. The second one is get as much experience as you can. Like if it means volunteering or doing an internship or helping out, be an RA in a lab, just build that experience. I think that really helps. And the third one has been said a lot is papers matter. Publish those bloody honours and those PhD papers. Like it matters, but it's not everything. And as it was said before, like think about those other experiences and skills and things that you can develop while you're doing whatever you're doing right now. So I'll leave it there. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Hedley. There is a question about working overseas and the thing. So post to 25, I think you can get some tailored advice. You may get a sticker from Hedley, which will help you join in the festivities with the poster. So is it post to 25, Hedley? Okay, well, we'll have one more speaker in a quick chat, or if people, we appreciate the time demands at the moment. So if you feel, I don't think you'll offend anyone if you need to leave for whatever reason. But our final speaker for this session is Cara Penton, who is the Ecological Monitoring Manager for the Waterkin Land Management, or for Waterkin Land Management. Thank you, Cara.
Introduce yourself and what job. Just going to get Lorena to just share what her job is, because it helps explain what my job is too. Just your name and what you do.
Hello, everyone. Hello, everyone. My name is Lorena Malmura, and I work for Waterkin Land Management.
What kind of activities do you do in your job?
My favorite skills is like setting, monitoring cameras with Cara.
Thank you, Mama. Okay. A little bit nervous. I'm very confused as to why I'm on this side. I feel like I should definitely be sitting in the audience, but really appreciative of the opportunity. So yeah, I'm Ecological Monitoring Manager at Waterkin Land Management, which is a non-for-profit land management organisation in the Waterkin Indigenous Protected Area, which is near Kakadu. My main role, the aim of my role is to deliver ecological monitoring and research with meaningful engagement and employment of traditional owners and rangers in the Indigenous protected area. Part of the role of what I stepped into was that in 2017, Waterkin had already established a long-term monitoring program. So I guess, so how did I get into the job? I kind of heard about it and I knew about the great work that they were doing. I had been in the Northern Territory already for a number of years, completing my PhD on the Tiwi Islands. Like I'm sure many of you have done here during that PhD, I did research assistant roles on other projects, science communication, engagement, committees, all of the grind that I'm sure everyone has been doing. So I don't really want to go into that too much. But I'd heard whispers that the role of an ecology position at an Aboriginal NGO was coming up, and I wanted it. So it luckily was perfect timing of I was coming out of my PhD, and I applied. And I just wanted to share a little bit of like what that interview process was. So after applying for the role, I was told to rock up at the Humpty Doo petrol station at 6:30 a.m. If you don't know, that's 40 minutes out of town where the boxing crocodile is. And I was like, cool. And then I had like no information. So I got there at 6:30 a.m. and I hopped in the car with the CEO and we drove 2 hours and 40 minutes to Jabiru. That was very awkward. Did not prepare for a 2.5-hour interview. I then hopped on a charter plane. I landed at Munmoy outstation and I had an interview with 10 senior Binnen that had flown in from all 3 outstations. And what I took from that interview was a project and a program that wanted that was focusing on caring for country and doing that in two ways, valuing Western science, but also delivering that program in a way that respected the values, ways of doing, and the knowledge that Binnen had. What was also really apparent to me during that interview was that they really wanted a scientist to help continue to deliver that program the way that they wanted it, but also to create good science together. And what does that mean? We're still even working it out together now. Admittedly, and you guys can't tell anyone about this out at Arnhem Land, I was offered another job at the same time, which was a bit more academic, a bit more, shall we say, linear. And I really grappled between the two. One job, you know, it had been a really amazing program. The core skills of the job was, you know, clear communication of science, working with traditional owners and rangers out on country, coordinating, facilitating fieldwork in a highly, highly remote setting. A lot of the work we do in the wet season is that we can only access it by planes. And I wasn't quite sure if I was ready to take the risk, because I knew what the job was, I knew what it could be. That was so apparent in the interview of what the future could be. But I was a little bit scared. And I did end up talking to the CEO, and he said to me, it will be, I said, I didn't want the job that it necessarily was, but what it could be. And he said to me, you can make it the job that you want it to be with people if you see that that's the vision. And it's been a number of years, but I truly feel like we're there, and obviously I accepted the job, so it all worked out. But I guess the program had been in a stage of data collection, and it had been really focused on how do we achieve the best way to do this together. And what the job needed, and why I stepped into the role, was there needed to be some strong data management, cleaning. I stepped in, there's already been 5 years of data collection, how to process this, how to create up, and how to pursue how we do research together. Now what I do is a lot of ranger training. I also bring in funding into the organisation, and I now do a lot of research management. So not only do I cover ecological monitoring, but collaborations with other people. And a lot of what we're entering now is we have the Waka Jaka subcommittee, where we've been in, we're working out how do we do research together, how do we communicate it to each other, how do we tell the story both ways. And that's everything from making videos, coming to conferences, and even asking the question of how do we genuinely write papers together, which is really exciting. As part of that, I've now started working as a research fellow, point 2, which was approved with the board of directors recently, and that was to kind of help bring this Waka Jaka and the next stage of the research to life. I guess my tips, I'm a little overwhelmed because I feel like I'm still very, very early in my career. But I guess, you know, I know that there's so many talented and skillful people here. And I do have a lot of people come to me and ask how I work on country. And I always start to get really uncomfortable about that, because really, you know, you should be talking to traditional owners and rangers about that. And there's so much opportunity to work with organisations. And I know that it might not seem, you know, the dream ecology job, or like it fits that box, but the ranger coordinators at Mummadaweri, they're actually ecologists, and they've recently completed their masters. And I think like the skills that you can bring into these organisations, you know, is truly amazing. And I would really love to see more ecologists working side by side within Aboriginal land management. And, you know, I think that what we can do together out on country is just so much stronger. So if there's just one thing I can say today is like, please take risks, and not just in the space of Aboriginal land management. Like I think there's a lot of opportunity within NGOs. There's so many skills that everyone here has, and I think, we can change what careers look like. Maybe that's an optimistic young person. But yeah, I do think, we can change what it means to kind of have a career. And I don't know if I'm going to stick with academia, but I definitely, I think all of these partnerships that I've already heard today about NGOs and universities is that I think our strengths in industry and NGO and academia really comes out, and I guess what we've also mentioned of having a greater impact. So yeah, thank you.
So just to clarify, please take risks includes getting into cars with strangers at semi-rural service stations. Yeah. Yeah. We'd have 3 more people to speak. One of the things I just wanted to mention, because it really raised and I probably want to get a show of hands from the panel here. Cara mentioned what I think we'd probably describe as imposter syndrome or some sort of thing like that. Have any of the rest of you experienced that? Yeah, I think so the reason I raised that is that there is a question about the importance of who you know in the networks, and that can be really confronting for people that haven't got expertise or comfort in doing those sorts of things. I think one of the things that this session that Sam and Sasha and Cara have organised to try and break down some of those things, that even if it's relatively passive now, not hunting these people down, but well, you can hunt them I don't mind. You hunt them down. And speaking to them, it really is a significant thing. I think David mentioned a bit of a sliding doors moment. Those little interactions can be really significant. So we do have some slides and some people. Is there any burning questions that people would like to raise, or anything they'd like to? If there's not, we might just chug through, because we do start the I'm getting lots of nods there. Good. Okay. We have 3 speakers left. I think we'll start with Kirsti Abbott from the Art Gallery and Museum of the Northern Territory. Oh, the right order? No, Museum and Art Gallery of the Northern Territory. It's the site of the book launch for the Reptiles of Northern Territory. Spoiler alert, they all look the same. Sorry. Over to Kirst.
Thanks, Dita. Funny you should mention imposter syndrome, because actually what I would like to talk about is probably the non-ecology things that I really wanted to talk about when I was at your stage. And I want to start off by saying that I think ecologists are some of the most amazing people I've ever met. I want you to back yourself as ecologists who work with complex systems every day and who see an interconnectedness in the world in a way that other people don't see the world. And I've found as an ecologist that has been so helpful in the way I see the systems that I work with. So whether that be people, whether that be data, whether that be animals, I worked with ants, so I work on a social insect system. I found that things in my career and my life reflected my study system and the nature around me all the time. I just get totally nerdy when I think about my career. So there's a few, I guess, kind of big ecological themes that I thought about in my career and that still drive me. And is anyone from Monash Uni here? Okay, I'm just going to go total nerd. So I've got Ancora imparo on my arm, which means I am still learning. And I think it's something that, animals do every day, right? They're learning all the time. And natural selection dictates that a generalist and somebody that's can easily adapt can find a niche, can find a place to be. And it's something that I've taken with me through my career. So at your stage, I was an ecologist. I did honours, PhD, postdoc, heavy field work, tropical, invasive ants on tropical islands. So I worked anywhere between North Queensland, Daintree, World Heritage places were my office, moving to Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean with red crabs and whale sharks and diving on beautiful places, and then through to New Zealand, Samoa, Tokelau, Tonga, Fiji, and kind of islands in the Pacific. So I worked in some amazing places. I learned amazing things. And, in your life happens. And so imposter syndrome happens. Babies happen. You fall in love with people who don't live where you want to live happens. Things happen. And I guess having that adaptability and backing yourself as somebody who understands a complex system and you can make it work, I say back yourself. So I imagine everyone in this room as an ecologist and a student is working hard in these systems. And so I would even say that you've already got the skills to be able to do that. You've got the skills, and it would be great to back yourself. Having said that, the people element that I wanted to talk about too is it's really amazing to have a mentor. And John mentioned mentoring really early, that he sees himself as a mentor. And I'm at the stage of my career, I guess, too, where I really do more mentoring than anything else, because I've benefited from mentors myself. I've sought mentors. I've had periods of my life, my career, where I haven't had a mentor and I have floundered. You know, I have had imposter syndrome, and you doubt yourself. You feel like you're not doing what you dreamed you might apply for a National Geographic Explorer grant and be kayaking around the Pacific. What? Nobody else dreams that? And you're not, and that's okay. So there's other pathways. So I came from being a social insect, scientist and ecologist, where mutualisms were also another theme. So I want to talk about mutualisms because it's not all about competition in ecology. You know, competition is the hallmark and has been the hallmark of ecology for a very long time. But mutualisms in my research also reflected the mutualisms I had with people in my career, and that was mentors, and that was colleagues and peers, and people that you hunt down at conferences can become your advocates as well. So I'd really think about the mutualisms you make. You don't have to be a loud extrovert. You can be a quiet person who seeks mutualisms that benefit you, and maybe sometimes you only, and that's okay too. So I'm the head of science at the Museum and Art Gallery here, but I was 28 years in the university system. I tried to get out a couple of times, but actually I'm a sucker for really amazing people who think idiosyncratically and who have, just quirks that make them curious people, and I love being around people like that. So I'd really, so my tips really at this point for you too is think about the kind of people you want to be around. I wanted to be around curious, passionate people, and I've found that in the choices I've made, in being adaptable, I've been able to do that. Museums are full of them, universities are full of them, NGOs and land management, bush heritage, AWC, all those, they're full of curious, passionate people. So go for that. I would also say, we work with biodiversity. Diversity infers resilience. I think about that all the time too. I wanted to be with diverse crews. Last night, if you were at Deck Chair Cinema, we had Tiger on the Rocks, and I brought together traditional owners, scientists, cultural people, kind of some ethicists, and people to talk about different perspectives on a topic, and I hugely value that in my life. So think about that. Think about maybe the place you want to be, the clothes you want to wear, the kind of language you want to speak. All those things will help you make decisions at decision points in your career. And if seriously, if you're ever having imposter syndrome, put me on speed dial. I will talk you through that shit. Because I want to back all of you now. I think ecologists are amazing, and I think no matter what system you go into and the kind of choices you make, I think that you've already got something nailed, and that's working with really complex systems. So good luck. I think, ecology looks like from this room anyway is in pretty good hands in the future.
Thank you very much, Kirsti. Speed dial, eh? Our next speaker is Sam Lloyd, one of the organisers of this group too. Sam's organisation, which I haven't got my glasses on for, is the Queensland Fire and Biodiversity Consortium, the Healthy Land and Water. So I might hand over to Sam once the slides. And I just want to flag while we're waiting for these slides to come on, a couple of people have raised in the question some really interesting points about more work-life balance, but more critically, mental health and the challenges of doing what you're doing. I don't think my experience from being around unis for a long time is that if you guys are students, you're at a stage of doing PhDs in a difficult environment, one that often feels quite adversarial, it's really important to try and look after yourself, and it's easier said than done. And I just wanted to flag that it's really important that you're mindful of that being a struggle that I'm not going to speak for everyone here, but I'm going to guess that many people have been through similar sorts of challenges throughout their lives. And I guess it's really critical to know that if you are feeling like you're not alone and there is support both in your institutions and through here. So I just wanted to raise that because I think it's a really important thing that to note that people in your position are quite vulnerable to quite a series of challenges, and there probably are, it's not new, it's probably many people have been through it and there might be a pathway to navigate through it. Anyway, on that happy note, Sam.
Thanks, Dana. Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming and joining us today. We're really thrilled with the turnout. It's been a while coming and really exciting to be able to share with so many amazing people. So my name's Sam Lloyd. I'm Principal Scientist for the Queensland Fire and Biodiversity Consortium at Healthy Land and Water, and I'm going to take a second just to explain what this is because I feel like we're possibly one of the sectors that people will not intuitively understand. So if I say to you local government, state government, and NGO in that traditional sort of Bush heritage sense, academia, you know what all of those are, but NRM sits a little bit different. So in Australia, we have a system where some states have NRM bodies or what we call regional natural resource management bodies, and some states have catchment management authorities. I'm sure some of you are across that and perhaps have worked for them. So I work for Healthy Land and Water, which is the regional NRM body for Southeast Queensland. And in that, our program is a collaborative fire management planning engagement education program. We're a really jack of all trades type of a program. I'm the SEQ manager and the science lead for the program. And what I tried to capture in this slide is our core values, our core focus in terms of delivering what is a really broad program. And the reason I wanted to do that is because it gives you an idea of these are all the things. You don't need to be an expert in each of these things, but these are the things we cover. And as you work in these roles, and I think NRM is really great in this perspective, it's like the perfect's a poor choice of word, but a really great compromise between research and practitioners. And that, I think, is something as ecologists we're learning to appreciate and showcase and prioritise more and more. So this understanding of stakeholder engagement, what does that even mean? Who are stakeholders? Well, that's all of us, really. But different stakeholder groups have different needs. So you've got private landholders, which is very different to a land manager, a government land manager, or an emergency service response organisation, or a utility provider. So these are the sort of concepts that when you do a traditional ecology degree, you might not initially have the opportunity to do. But when you have an opportunity to look at different jobs, these are the sorts of things that in land management are really super important. One of course, I would just quickly touch on as well, translating science. This is a big one. We've heard communication come up again and again, and really that's what communication's about, translating science so it's appropriate for your audience. Is it children? Is it other people in your sector who get it but perhaps have a different view, or is it people that are not converted to what you're hoping to bring them across in terms of a story? How did I get my job? Look, there's a little timeline of dot points of how I started and where I've ended up. But the main point is to throw your hat in the ring. Back yourself and give yourself a chance. I put myself in for a job with the New South Wales NCC. I got offered an interview and then decided to move interstate to be with my partner. When I called them and explained that, they went, "You should talk to so-and-so. He lives in Brisbane. He works with the NRM bodies." I did that, and that led to the job I got up there. So, be brave, if nothing else, throw your hat in the ring for a job, even if you don't think you're going to do it. Because then when I went to the NRM body, I knew I wasn't right for that job. But the CEO went, "I've got another one. Will you fill this position for me?" And that's how we got started. So there's always an opportunity. And on that, with the industrial placement and the work experience, it's really tough. It's really tough when you come out of a PhD and you've got no money and you're trying to make ends meet. So you do need to look after yourself. You don't want to get taken advantage of. But the great thing about industrial placements is that they can be short, right? You can get these nice periods of time. Our industrial placement student, who was so persistent and so great with getting on board with us, ended up getting a casual job with us and then left it for another job that she got that I refereed her for. So often these opportunities that come up as short term and you can go, "Man, I don't know, 6 months, that doesn't seem long enough." Something will happen. You'll meet somebody. You'll impress someone. The funding will change in your organisation. And It costs so much money. Transfer of staff within a business is extremely expensive. So when you've got someone great, you don't want to lose them. So we'll work really hard to keep everyone because it's just too expensive to lose people. So think about that. Once you've invested in that company, it's in their interest to keep you. So that's another sort of way to think about it, I suppose. Core skills. To be honest, this is on the assumption. So on the assumption you've got an NRM, an Enviro degree, a biology degree, an ag degree, I think is the other one. To be honest, project management is super important. And you run a PhD, you're running a project. But event management is also important. And it's a really important skill when it comes down to communicating and engaging with people and bringing people into what you do. Can you convince other people to come and give it a go, to sit on your committee, to give a bit of their time in kind? Communication, we all know this. Facilitating and translating science, we said that already, and building partnerships. The program that I ran was 11 partners in SEQ when I started it, and it's 18 partners in Queensland wide now because we've built partners, because we build relationships, and that's actually about building trust and investing in the good people around you, because that's what you mean. To be honest with people, when you say, I can't do this bit, you guys are the expert in this, or you've got loads more knowledge, or you've got those contacts and you've got that understanding. We need you to be will you be part of this with us? And then the stakeholder engagement, I put what we consider really important about stakeholder engagement, because that's a super important part of ecology and land management, and is becoming a more and more important part of research, I think, as well, because where it needs to be applied, it needs to be communicated, and it needs to be understood. Just going to finish on my tips. So do what fills your bucket. My kids have a book at home that's called Have You Filled Your Bucket Today? And it's not just about doing the stuff that it's fun and that you love, but also about doing the stuff that you want to give to. So I volunteer with ESA. I volunteer writing reviews for children's books in Science and Nature for Children's Books Daily, which is a children's blog. And when I did that, I then met the people at CSIRO Publishing, and then I pitched them an idea, and then they said yes, and they published my book, and this is my book, which is a Zero. So stuff happens now. I can't retire on that, but it definitely fills my bucket, and it's really fun, and it teaches me to communicate, and it's really aligned to my job. So there can be these co-benefits from having a side hustle, having something that you enjoy doing that perhaps doesn't pay all the bills, but is related to what you do and helps make you feel like you're making that contribution or getting somewhere. Find a mentor. This has been said, so I guess I don't need to say it, but build a village. So sometimes mentors might be quite specific, but a village is the people that inspire you, either in your sector or otherwise, that give you that encouragement that you can turn to and say, I am having imposter syndrome about my children's book, which I was at ESA in November, December last year, massive panic attacks. But you back yourself and you get through that day, and then it passes, because that's what happens. And values and culture, this will be my last point. Like Lincoln said, it takes a certain person to be in the big corporate consultancies or to be in the state government sort of roles. So think about what values matter to you. Do you want to have a family? Do you want to travel? Do you want to work part-time? Do you want flexibility? Do you want the money? All of those things matter, but you don't have to get it all to begin with. Give yourself a chance. But I guess if you know you're going to hate full-on corporate consultancy, don't torture yourself with that. And think about the values associated. Is it important to you to work for an NGO, for instance? Because that's important when you invest yourself in those roles. And yeah, don't dismiss NRM, land management, local government. Local government aren't represented today, but I'm quasi going to represent local government. Great opportunities, terrific across the board. You learn about land management and exotic pests and policy and planning and engagement with people and community and communication. So think about a little bit outside of the box about perhaps what you might thought an ecology job is. And be brave.
Thank you, Sam. So A Light by Sam and Lloyd, available at all good bookstores. And Pep Turner's going to bring us home. And I guess You mentioned internships too and placements. There is a question in this. I mean, there's one element to that the ESA's, I know, is mindful on from my time as a VP is unpaid internships and volunteer things are really discriminatory in so many ways because a lot of people can't afford to do them. So I think there's a real push. I think even the ESA has a policy of just promoting non-predatory ones or ones where there's an element of training and value to the internship or and then there are courses that embed them. And I just want, I think, yeah, and I think there's also a question about industry postdoctoral fellowships and the like in there. And I guess that's something that's probably better handled through the bulletin in terms of the detail, because the industries that have been raised here will make partners for people that want to bridge the research industry nexus, and it may be an opportunity for you. But it's a great pleasure to mention our final speaker. Thank you. You've all managed. You've been great speakers because they still got neck control. There's no one. Oh, so I'm used to lectures where everyone's doing this. Pep Turner is going to speak to us now. I'll let you introduce yourself, Pep, and I'll start ringing the bell.
Yeah, just that'd be better. I did say to Cara, I don't need to talk. But anyway, Pep Turner's my name. I'm, as it says up there, I'll go through my job first. So you know him as the ESA president, current one. But what I do is a little bit different to everyone else, but I'll show you the trajectory and how I got there. So Sam and my positions are a bit like this. I do a little bit more government stuff. So I'm the manager of the State Fire Management Council. I work for the Tasmania Fire Service. I work for the enemy, as they say in Tasmania. I work at the coalface, though, right through to government. So what that means is I report to the minister. So I have a very different position. I manage a statutory body, so it's a body that has to be there under the Fire Service Act. And that body gives advice and recommendations to the minister on anything to do with fire and vegetation management for Tasmania across the sector, public and private. So I've quite a lot of, I could say, responsibility. They say power, I say responsibility. So I support fire management planning from the grassroots to the government. I oversee and manage a landowner burning program where we actually try and encourage landowners to take a drip torch and start writing burn plans and start looking to the future and how they need to manage their land for the ecological values, environmental values, and fuel reduction. I also oversee a bit of research and innovation within that sector. So we look at collaborations within the university sectors in particular. I oversee the Tasmanian Vegetation and Fire Management Policy. So I get all stakeholders on board throughout the state and that they have to sign up to that. It's a principle-based policy. As I said, we have education, so that comes through our landowner burning program and anything else to do with community capacity and awareness. So we have planned burning guidelines and other documents that we help roll out. We also look at governance and resource management. So what that means is I often battle with the government to get funded. So there's a lot of money that takes place. So how did I get there? I started off in Victoria. This is where I met John many, many years ago. So this was my first job out of honours. In fact, I hadn't finished honours. I did my honours defence after getting this job. And then I got a bit bored. I was working on 3 regional forest agreements throughout Victoria. I went and did a PhD, had a choice between Melbourne Uni and Tassie. I got encouraged to go to Tasmania and I stayed because I met someone. So you see, these things happen. I became a scientific officer at the Antarctic Division, so I got to go to a couple of sub-Antarctic islands. By the way, my PhD was on bryology, bryophytes, mosses, who really cares? But it does take you places. Because, of course, as most people know, what's Antarctica? Moss. I didn't get to Antarctica, but I got to the sub-Antarctic, and yeah, there's a lot more non-vascular plants there, just to give a plug. You talked about industry-based postdocs. That's what mine was. So I went from the Antarctic Division to do a postdoc with it became the Natural Hazards CRC after that, but with Forestry Tasmania through the University of Tas. So I did that for about 5 years. By that stage, I was part-time. Became a lecturer at UTAS, research assistant at UTAS. I also did some consultancy work, so I was doing all of this concurrently, all sort of part-time roles, and then went into government, worked as a research biologist with a government organisation. They're the regulator of forestry in the state. And then the last 2 jobs are now at the Tas Fire Service. Just to let you know, this job was full-time. The last 2 jobs were full-time, the rest weren't. And the last 2 jobs are the only permanent positions I've ever had. Okay, and I'm nearly 50. So they're the last 2 years. What I wanted to point out was, yes, I had kids. There's my kids. So that was 4 kids crammed into 6 years. I found I was something I was good at. I also tacked on being an expert, so I can really recommend apply to be on a scientific advisory board or body for your state. Every state has a Threatened Species Act, and there's a scientific advisory committee associated with that. So I was a non-vascular and vascular plant expert. Thought, nah, they're not going to take me. Yeah, they did. So hey. One of the other things I can really promote is this society. These are all the roles I've had within ESA. So the first one, we had councillors for each state. This is going back a few years. The book review editor role, I took over from Ian Lunt. I did that for 9 years. Really good for that imposter syndrome, because you're suddenly reviewing book reviews from the professors, from the academics, from these people. You think, oh my God, I'm reviewing their stuff. It was brilliant, and they gave me a lot of insight into that role. You were mentored by some really amazing editors. Does wonderful things for your review skills. I can thoroughly recommend doing that. And subsequently became the chair of a journal. Never thought I'd ever do that either, but got that opportunity. And as I said, spanned out into president. And after that, I'm moving off. I'll leave it to someone else. I wanted to point out the things that aren't ecologically related that I've done. So this is where I was trying to get some extra. Look, I was part-time and I was trying to keep my brain motivated, because changing a nappy is not motivating. So I started getting involved in things in my kids' school, but lo and behold, that led on to some pretty cool jobs. So the Catholic School Parents Council, I became the president. I started sitting on the Catholic Education Commission, which is the highest level that you can get in Catholic education in Tasmania. So starting to having a bit of insight into driving some things there. And that also led to being with the National Tertiary Education Union and being a secretary. So a union boss, if you like, another enemy, some people say, but advocating for people who are in academia. And I really got a lot out of that. So I can recommend those skills, negotiation skills, conflict management. I got all of that from being that union boss. So that helped me with my current role. The other last thing I wanted to note is I'm a volunteer firefighter. And I went down that track, and really they saved me, because I did get into a pretty big rut a couple of years ago during COVID. Well, I'm pretty down, and I was suddenly my husband is an academic as well, non-secure jobs, 4 kids, everything, just thinking, shit, this really sucks. And I thought, right, I've always wanted to be a volunteer firer. I went down that track, and I now work with some of the most amazing community-based dynamic people I ever have. In combination with ESA, the two together really lifted me. So I can really recommend doing something out of your toolbox. But really, it's all about getting more boots. My husband laughs because he just goes, oh my God, you've got another pair of boots. And I'm getting another pair. If I'm getting another pair of boots, I'm so excited. So what I wanted to just emphasise was plot your career pathway, but don't think you have to stick to it. Just believe in fate. My aunt said that when I moved to Tasmania, and yeah, the rest is history. I did find a mentor. Now the university had a mentoring plan during my postdoc. They had a course. So the person, and she's even texting me now, 15 years later, she's overseas on a holiday. And so those mentoring people that you can find can be lifelong friends. But she was also my manager at Forest Practices. So I can really recommend doing that. And I found someone who had a similar pathway to where I thought I was going to go. Yeah, we sort of went a little bit like this, but just having that bouncing board sort of thing. So what do you think about this? What do you think about this? How the hell did you go back to work after having kids? So, and don't forget to collect boots. So that's all I wanted to say.
I have very little to say. There's just one thing. There's a couple of things I'd like to do before I hand over to some folk to wrap up. Look, it's really hard to work out what I think the best thing that could happen out of this will be we can certainly get a summary of the questions that you've got together to try and really address. Some of them require a little bit of detail. One thing I will just mention is that one person's asked what are the most fun things and what are the least fun things. I can't speak for everyone here, but in my day job, you guys are one of the fun things. So thank you for amusing me for so many years. Sorry? That's not, if you're not a very compliant person, financial reporting, you just wait till you get the 50th email. So what I'd like, I might flip this a little bit. I'd like our panelists just to join me in thanking you guys for your attention this afternoon. You've been fantastic, so thank you, everyone. So you weren't expecting that, were you? And I'd like to thank Pep, Anna, Headley, Heather, Lincoln, Kirsti, Cara, John, and Sam and Cara for all the work they've done, and Sasha for putting this thing together. And I'm going to hand back to Sam, Cara, Sasha, or whoever handed. But thank you. I'd like you to join me in thanking all those people for what they've done for you guys today.
Sam wants questions from the audience. We do. Who's died? You got 5 minutes till posters. Uh-oh. Maybe. Dun, dun, dun. Does anyone have any questions for the panel that while everyone's here? While you're mulling over, if anyone has any burning questions, I'll leave the Slido up. There's a few other questions in there. I'm not that technical, so I don't know if you can see the right ones, but hopefully you can. So I'll leave it open. If you have any other ideas, chuck them up there. That'll be really great. We'll mull over it and try and answer some of your questions or put together some of the articles for the bulletin based on some of the topics that were coming up. I really feel like there's a Women in Science article in there. And how to get a mentor if you're not if you don't want to hunt people at conferences. Maybe that should be a bulletin article. But in general, the ESA is really keen to support you. And there's lots of different ways we can do that. And we've been trialing different ways over the last couple of years. There's a mentoring program, which has just closed for this year, but it's going to be ongoing now. So if you didn't join the program this year, please join next year and we can pair you. It's not an academic thing. We can definitely try and find you a mentor in many types of ecological fields. So definitely look into that. It'll probably open in February, March. We're also hoping to get anyone interested in early career ecology and trying to think through a plan of what ESA could do for you guys. We're hoping to get like a roundtable discussion going at the end of this year and bring some people together face-to-face in Sydney. And we'll be putting out an expression of interest for people to join that roundtable. It'll be coming out in the e-news sometime soon. So look out for that. Anything other housekeeping things we haven't thought of?
So the issue of being a mum and working in ecology is a really valid topic. I think statistically it's still harder. I mean, I think the opportunities are there and the intent is there, but if you look at the numbers on the table, it's still harder. I have 2 children. They are amazing and parasitic. Which most parents So there is a few of us thinking about this at the moment and how ESA can contribute to this discussion. So come and find us and have a chat because it is something we'd like to talk a bit more about because we've all had challenges around this, but we also want to encourage,
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's lots of, it could get gross, we could talk about nappies, poo and vomit. And I was just telling Pep, at the start of the conference last time I came here and I had imposter syndrome and I didn't want to talk to some professor because I was in my first trimester and I had to spend the whole time being like, don't vomit, Cara, don't vomit, don't vomit. That's a thing. It's a thing. But we don't talk about it enough. So we should write a bulletin article about that. Any other questions? Otherwise we can release you for the poster session.
So Emily Nicholson's also written about post-PhD. But I guess my point about writing that blog was have those conversations with people before you finish your PhD if you're in that stage, because I never did. And if I had, and that's what the post-PhD conversation is all about. There's so much out there, and this is what having this forum. So this is a really expanded version of that blog that I wrote. Now my blog's 7, 8 years old. So, but still some of it is very current, which is a bit disappointing because it does talk about academia and women. But it also talks about the positive, you know, it says that there's light, you know, there's changes that have happened in that time. So it's not all negative.
Come find us and have a chat.
And thanks for coming and paying attention for the whole time.
So I'm kind of at a stage where it's like, should I maybe do a PhD? Should I just try and stay in the industry? I'm not really sure. I find interest in a lot of things, and so I'm wondering like, what is like, how do I pick to whether do a PhD or not? Where to do it? What supervisor? Should I even do it at all? Or not?
Okay, quickly, you don't pick. You can do, sorry. You don't need to choose in the sense that you can do both. You can do PhDs that partner with industry. You can do a PhD and then go back to industry. So I would say potentially for starters, take that pressure off yourself. If you're interested in both, apply for the PhD or apply for the industry and think about how that might work, because pretty much everyone in this panel has done both.
No one asked me if I have a PhD. They asked me if I can solve the problem. Yeah. They never asked me what my education is.
Yeah, I'm the only one with a PhD in my workplace.
I was just going to say, like, a PhD is a very personal journey as well. Like, we all know people who probably haven't finished their PhD through no fault of their own. So there's never a right time. I think you have to be inside. Like, it's the thing that the timing is right. I think you actually know the timing is right. And if it's not right, you can pause. So it's not the end of your life. And it's another really important thing to learn, that it doesn't define you. If you don't finish, that's actually okay. It's heaps of other opportunities. But if you do it, you've also got to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Is it to get a job, or is it actually the challenge, the intellectual kind of stimulus? I take on lots of PhD students who are mature age students. In fact, you know, students. I've got one in his 60s, one in their late 40s. They're coming back to a PhD because they want the intellectual challenge. The time's right at that point for them. So don't put yourself under too much pressure. And I'd really encourage, there are industry